This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
Fuel prices have increased across the country. This increase comes shortly after the Dangote Refinery announced the suspension of the naira for crude sales. Of the naira for petrol sales. The announcement was made on the 19th of March as the Dangote Refinery said that it would stop the domestic supply of petrol in naira due to the suspension of the naira for crude sales by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPCL. Joining the conversation is Ayodele Oni, an oil and gas expert. Mr. Oni, good morning and thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Mr. Oni, we're happy to have you on. I mean, there are events that have since overtaken this particular conversation. At 3:05 a.m. this morning, the special advisor to the president announced a reconstitution of the NNPCL and a sacking of the previous members we've known for a few years now. Let's start with your initial reactions and we'll tie that to this conversation around the prices of petrol.
Everyone saw this coming. I mean, most people who were in the sector saw it coming, but we're wondering why it took so long. You've been hearing biodulary for a while. I'm sure you've been hearing there's been a lot around it. There've been, if you remember that professor in the US, that Nigerian professor who writes articles that written about him, and whether it was a Westerner or a Northerner or a mix. So it's something that's been long coming. Some have connected it to the ongoing impasse with the Dangote Refinery around the naira for crude or naira for petrol, as some will call it. I don't know if that's the reason or if it was something already in the works and they needed some perfecting it before announcing. But something some of us had always known. And it's not unusual, right? Every time a new president comes, they change the MD of the NNPC for whatever reason.
Perhaps there's questions on. I want to get your sense of what you expect from the board, the new board, but the president has also given his expectations, including hitting $30 million in investments by 2027 and then doubling that by 2030. Same thing around the oil production, if you like, reservations for the company itself. Do you think that they're able to meet up with these expectations?
I think some of the guys on the board are some of the very best people you'd find around. The guys from Renaissance, Atodularis, worked with Shell, worked with Elf. Maybe they said he was first engineer. He's got a rich CV. I also know Dr. David Ige, brilliant, excellent PC. One of the guys who developed our gas sector to what it is today. I think one or two or three of them I also know a little about are really good people. So rich CV doesn't necessarily translate to excellence, but more often than not, it could be, right? So I expect that since they have that mandate, they will run with the mandate. And one of the first things they want to resolve is the impasse they've been having with Dangote every now and then. They want to find out what's the best commercial arrangement that works for both parties and that generally works for Nigerians. I think that's a critical point, right? Also, when you consider that very soon the rumors are there and I'd always known, and I think in previous life, in previous employment, I may have advised on that acquisition about where Dangote does have oil blocks that may be producing soon, and once they reach production, then he's more integrated and he controls production, his own refining, and then maybe pricing may then be cheaper. I don't know, depending on how his economic model or financial model is, right? So I think they can achieve it. I think they can achieve some of it. Maybe not immediately, maybe not everything the president wants. But I think they are good people in terms of quality.
Well, Mr. Oni, that brings us to the crux of the matter, the increases that we've seen in recent times. We've talked to you in the past about fluctuations in the prices of petrol, but we are seeing petrol prices go up across Nigeria for the first time in months. There's been a lot of talk about why this is happening. I wonder if you can give us your thoughts. Is this really about the naira for crude conversation, or is there something more?
I think it's a combination of many factors. and it all ends with its cost of production. If food prices increase because they don't want to sell at naira anymore and it has to source for USD, cost of doing business, is logistics and all of that, bringing food in. And I understand that even that crude he was being given by NNPC wasn't sufficient, so he had to import. If your cost of producing an item increases, of course, usually the end users bear the brunt. That's what it is in summary. We may say a lot, but the summary is that if cost of production, cost of refining increases, then there'd be an increase. Because remember that what he's doing is buying a resource or a product, a base product, and then adding value. So if the base product was, say, $80 before and now becomes $90, or the equivalent of $80 before and is now paying $90, the equivalent of $80 and they're now paying $90, and they have to add other factors like logistics. Of course, it's not going to sell the finished product what he was selling it when it was $80. That's what it is, right? It's an input one, and it's a pass through usually when you have this sort of cost. And I'm not standing in for anyone, whether it's government, whether it's Dangote. I'm just being completely honest and stating things as I understand them, accurately or otherwise.
So, you said that you expect this new membership or leadership is likely to hasten whatever the collaborations are between the government and Dangote Refinery. Under the leadership of Mele Kyari, there was a sense from some quarters that there were political influences driving the tensions and the rifts. Do you expect that we might see a replication of those kinds of tensions depending on where the interests lie?
Oh, if you understand the history of the oil and gas industry, you can't divorce or divorce, as some people will say, politics from oil and gas. You just have to be careful how much it influences you. So I expect that some of those players will still want to rear their ugly heads, but it's now dependent on how the new board plays its own game and understands that they have a mandate and they want to deliver on that mandate and want to spend considerable time on the board. So that's it. If ultimately you do play politics, but if you do play politics, but ultimately Nigerian citizens benefit and the president is seen in good light, then he's likely to retain you longer than he would have if he was otherwise, right? So I think politics will play a role, but I expect that many of these guys being professionals and wanting to make a mark will look beyond the politics of it. I expect.
So another thing the president has asked is a review of NNPC operated assets as well as joint venture assets, right? And it's described as a strategic portfolio review. What do you think we should perhaps expect from this review? Do you think when it's eventually done, it will be made public? And perhaps just for you to clarify why it's important and what the expectations are.
Okay, so what's important? There will be assets that are not being properly run. There will be assets they really do not need. If they look at portfolio rationalization, they may want to dispose of some assets. They may want to invest more in some assets. They may want to partner. That's basically what they're going to be doing, right? They're going to be looking at each asset and determining whether they should be operator, whether the asset management team is doing. Because some of those assets, there were joint ventures before Shell in particular sold, Shell, Chevron sold, and they were operators. What they have is an asset management team where they have members of staff of each of those companies acting like the joint venture, like the operator. So they have an asset management team. We want to look at whether those things are really working. Should they be operator? They have technical operators. Should they sell? Should they buy? Should they exercise right of first user or not? Those are the sort of things they will do, and I expect that they will rationalize their portfolio, sell some, maybe acquire one or two producing assets. I'm not quite sure what they will do, but I think the review maybe even has started before these guys left. But the pace was slow and not much had been done. So I expect that they'll do much more, since that's one of the mandates were given, and I think they would hit the ground running around that.
Mr. Oni, thank you very much for your time and expertise on this conversation. Ayodele Oni is an oil and gas expert who joined us this morning to speak on a number of issues in the oil and gas sector, from the reconstitution of the NNPCL's board to other conversations around the pricing of petrol in Nigeria. You're still listening to Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos. We are your Beyond the News station, and we urge you to stay tuned as we continue to bring you the conversations lined up for you this morning on Now Breakfast.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.